Hello lovely folks of YouTube, Ren here. So I am going to get to the book review, which is what this video is about, but before we get started, I just want to point out this amazing shirt that I got while I was on vacation. It is from the Mars Cheese Castle, which is not far from Bristol, Wisconsin. Kenosha, I believe, is where it's located. We did go there. Don't get me wrong, like, this is a staple. Like, I had never been there before, although I had driven past this place numerous times when I was a child, and we finally got to go. It is the dumbest tourist trap ever, but it was fucking glorious, and I loved it. And if you've ever been in that part of Wisconsin, you know this sign, because it's been there since the 60s. I just wanted to point out how frickin' stoked I was. So, yay, Mars Cheese Castle! I finally went. But anyway, that's not why we're here. We are here to do a book review. Specifically, what I want to talk about is this book right here. This just recently came out from Llewellyn. This is Backyard Garden Witchery by Laurel Woodward. Laurel Woodward does have one other book that she put out maybe about a year ago or so, year and a half, sometime around then, which is a kitchen witchery book. I have read her kitchen witchery book. I had some really mixed feelings about it. It started to get kind of tedious and drag. I didn't actually, like, I was really skimming through a lot of it, the second half of that book. But her tone in that book really kind of got under my skin a little bit. So she seemed a little bit judgy in that book. I am happy to say that that attitude does not seem to be present in this book. So yay for that. And when I say judgy, I mean, like, there was a lot of stuff about, like, how basically you were a bad person if you didn't choose to eat organic foods, as if people have control over their finances or where they live or what their socioeconomic status is, which really did not sit well with me. So none of that is present in this book, I'm happy to say. But anyway, let's get into this book here. So Backyard Garden Witchery, it is creating a magical space outside your door. Embrace the magic of gardening and growing your own living, breathing sanctuary, blah, 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 spells, recipes, etc., etc. So, this book is divided into two parts. The first part is your magical garden. I think it's the magical garden or your magical garden, the magic garden. And then the second part is the compendium of magical plants. Part one is more about gardening per se, but honestly, the gardening info that's in there, although what she does have is really good, it really just kind of skims the surface. It's very, like, brief, shallow, introductory type info. So if you're looking for actual gardening info, like, this is a good introductory text, but you're going to get more out of going to the actual gardening book section in your library or bookstore and looking for books there. I'll be completely honest. But that's true of most of the witchy gardening books. So that's not really a criticism of her book specifically. There are recipes in the first section. And there are some exercises as well. But a lot of the exercises are very, very basic exercises. Like, she gives a grounding and centering exercise, which I'm like, if you're buying a book of this sort, I would expect that you already have some experience in witchcraft, and we don't need to go over grounding and centering yet again. But it's in there, so yeah. I don't know. It's just, to me, like, that always feels like a space filler in a lot of these books. Like, if you're going into a specialty area like this, if your book is a specialized book, you shouldn't be having to give basic beginner info in it. It just feels like it's wasting space. But it's in there, so, you know, but there are some good exercises in here. Like, there's a spell for, like, blessing the water to sort of, that you then use to water your plants, which I think is cool, you know, stuff like that. The recipes I have mixed feelings about as well, because, sometimes they make sense and sometimes they feel like they're kind of shoehorned in a weird way. So, for example, like in her section on flower gardens, she gives a lot of recipes for spells that use flowers and flower petals and things like that, which totally makes perfect sense. But then there's other section, like in her section on vegetable gardens, she has two types of recipes in there. One is for food items, which is completely appropriate for a vegetable gardening section. And then she gives recipes for, like, spells that use vegetables, which some of them make sense. Like, there's one for making a magical ink out of beets, which I think was cool. But then there's other stuff that uses like walnuts and avocados, and I'm like, these are not things that you either can or should grow in most gardens, because of course avocados don't grow in most of the temperate areas, and walnuts, no. If you want to have vegetables, don't grow walnuts in your yard, because the walnuts will kill everything. They're actually secrete something through their roots called juglone, that jugalone, my husband likes to call it, because he's witty, dad jokes. Yeah, it will kill off a lot of the plants that are not compatible, particularly tomatoes. So if you want tomatoes, you can't have walnuts. You can't compost anything with the walnuts and put that compost in your yard, like nothing. So that's why I'm kind of like about some of this spells that she gives in there. It's like, I just feel like if you're going to have a book about gardening magic, that most of the spells and recipes that you give should at least primarily consist of things from the garden, and not just like, you know, a one-off ingredient in a whole bunch of other stuff. You know, like she has spells that use like all kinds of essential oils and tourmaline and, you know, gemstones and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but how does that has nothing to do with what you're getting out of the garden. You know, and she will give, like in the herb magic, she gives a lot of spells that use things like nutmeg and cinnamon and cloves, which are fine. Like most people would have them in their kitchen cabinets in their herbs and spices. But again, they're not things that you're growing in the garden. So it feels like a weird thing to include in a book about magical gardening. It's perfectly fine for like a general green witchy book, but not one that's supposed to be specifically focused on gardening. So that was kind of it just, I don't know, it felt weird to me. It felt weird to me. So let me see. So, let me take a short break here. Okay, now that I know my camera won't cut me off, part 2 is where I feel like this book really shines. So the Compendium of Herbal Plants. This part of the book is divided into sections, and each section looks at a specific type of plant. So you have things like flowers, herbs, veggies, bulbs, perennials, which includes things like shrubs and vines. She also gives sections on plants that aren't necessarily always normally looked at, like weeds, and plants that help to support wildlife, like native plants and stuff, which I really appreciated, because I feel like those are overlooked in a lot of the herbal craft books, because they generally tend to be very Eurocentric. Having those included, I really appreciated that. Each plant gets its own brief synopsis on not only how to grow the plant, but also how to use it magically, which is kind of like what I do with my channel, so I can definitely appreciate that. I feel like sometimes her entries are a little on the short side, like they could definitely be expanded, but if you're just being introduced to this plant, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, gives you a jumping off point to learn more. And she does sometimes go into some of the history and folklore of some of the plants that have a lot of history and folklore behind them. Things like calendula and mugwort, things like that. So, honestly, I felt like the second half of this book was really sort of the highlight of this book. This is where this book shines, is in that second half. And it's that second half, that compendium of plants, that really makes this, is what makes this book worthwhile. Although the first half is fine, it doesn't really feel like a gardening book. It feels more like just a generic like how to green witch book with a little bit of extra gardening info shoehorned in. The second book was actually where you find, with the description of how to grow these plants, is where I would consider to be more actual gardening info. And even that isn't a whole lot. It's more of just like a description of what zones the plants are in, what type of sun they take, and what type of soil they prefer. And that's really it. So, yeah. But anyway, I don't regret buying this book. This book is not exactly, I mean, it's a new book. It just came out. It's on the more expensive side. Like the retail price on this is $30. I did not pay $30 for it, thankfully. But still, it retails for $30, which is a lot for a new book, especially like a Llewellyn book that usually tend to be more in like the $20 range. So, I don't know. I feel like if you're looking for gardening info, then you're better off reading a garden book, but I can say that of most of the green witchery, you know, type books. Like if you're looking to do a green witchery garden, I'm always going to tell you to actually read a gardening book. And if you're looking for recommendations on that, go to your library and look at anything that has the Rodale Press icon on the spine, because that's going to be always my first recommendation. Rodale is a independent press that specializes specifically in gardening books, and they're going to be some of the best. In fact, do I have that? Oh, they're in other sections. I think they're over there. I moved all my garden books over there. But I do have several Rodale books over there, and yeah, in fact, Rodale's Illustrated Encyclopedia of Herbs is a better green witchery garden book than this one, I'm just going to say, and it's been out since the 70s at least. I think my edition is from the 70s, so I got it for $2 used. I'm just going to say that. But anyway, yeah, I like I said, I don't regret buying this book. But I feel like if you're looking for real specific info, if you're looking to really dive deep, then this is not the best book for it. If you are just getting started, as in you're like brand spanking new to both not only gardening, but also green witchcraft, you could do a lot worse than starting with this book. I probably still would recommend that you get a general green witchcraft book like Paige Vanderbeck's book, and then also some gardening books instead. But if you don't want to buy 5 books and you just want to buy one book that kind of touches on everything, you could do a lot worse than this book. So yeah, if you are an absolute rock bottom beginner and you have no idea what you're doing when it comes to both green witchcraft and gardening, then maybe this is the book for you. But if you're looking for something a little bit deeper, if you already have experience in green witchcraft and in gardening, and you want to expand on that information, then you're going to want to look for another book. So anyway, this book will be entering my collection. It will be going, will it fit on here? Maybe. This is where I keep all my herbal compendium books right here. You can see I do have an organization system to this bookshelf. I occasionally have to move things around as things fit or don't fit. It may go here or it may go down here with my green witchcraft books. I have a lot of books, y'all. It's not yet a problem, but it's definitely, if I let it get out of hand, it will become a hoarding situation, so I have to keep myself in check. But anyway, yeah, I don't regret buying the book, but like I said, it's not cheap, you know, and I don't know. I feel like there are other less expensive resources out there that might serve you equally well. So anyway, I think that's going to sum it up. I'm looking at my notes here to make sure I didn't miss anything. So yeah, if you're looking for a brand spanking new beginner type book, like I said, you could do worse if you can afford it, or if you get it used, or at your library. Because yay for libraries. Libraries are awesome. If your library does not have this book, they may be able to look for other libraries in the area that do, and do a, you know, a library transfer. That is a thing. You know, or you can always request that they add it to their catalog, because they will do that sometimes if they get a request for a book. So anyway, yay, support your local library. So that's all I have for you today. I hope this video finds you well, and I will see you again soon.